Look, nobody tells you when you sign up for the Galactic Exchange Program that you're going to end up being a walking daycare for the galaxy's most terrifying apex predators. The brochure mentioned cultural exchange, diplomatic relations, maybe some light translation work. What it did not mention was becoming an accidental babysitter to something that could theoretically eat your face off before you even realized you were in danger. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. My name is Maya Chen, and I'm what the Galactic Council politely calls a Terran representative, which is a fancy way of saying I'm the human they shoved into a spaceship and told to go make friends. No pressure or anything, just represent your entire species to a cosmic community that thinks you're either adorably harmless or terrifyingly unstable, depending on which rumor mill you're listening to that day. The thing about humans, and I really cannot stress this enough, is that the rest of the galaxy thinks we're insane. Not in a fun, quirky way either. In a, why would you ever do that? Are you actively trying to die kind of way? We eat things that are poison to most species and call them spicy. We jump out of perfectly functional aircraft for entertainment. We invented something called parkour, which as far as I can tell is just falling with style and a concerning lack of self-preservation instinct. So when I arrived at Station Kepler 442, a massive diplomatic hub orbiting a gorgeous blue giant star, I was prepared for the stares, the whispers, the occasional species that would literally cross to the other side of the corridor when they saw me coming, which honestly hurts your feelings a bit, even when you understand it's because they think you're a death world predator who might snap at any moment. What I was not prepared for was the Vakrian. The Vakrian are, and I'm trying to be diplomatic here, absolutely nightmare fuel. Imagine if a tiger and a velociraptor had a baby, and that baby was 7 feet tall with obsidian black scales that seemed to absorb light, razor-sharp claws that could gut a cargo hauler, and bright amber eyes that tracked movement with the precision of a guided missile system. They're obligate carnivores, apex predators from a world where literally everything is trying to kill everything else. And they have a cultural history of ritual combat that makes human cage fighting look like a gentle disagreement over tea. Oh, and they purr when they're content, which is somehow more unsettling than if they just growled all the time. The Vakrian delegate's name was Kreshna, and she scared the absolute hell out of approximately everyone on the station except for the other 2 Vakrian who were part of her entourage. She was sleek, dangerous, and had a way of looking at you that made you acutely aware of exactly how many bones were in your body and how easily they could be removed from said body. We'd been on the station for about 3 weeks when I first met her, and our interaction consisted of exactly one conversation where she'd asked me if humans really did bond with Earth predators as companions. I'd said yes and showed her pictures of my sister's golden retriever. And she'd made a noise that I'm 70% sure was Vakrian for, "You people are clinically insane." Fair assessment, honestly. But then came the incident that would forever change my understanding of interspecies relations and also give me a minor heart condition. I was in one of the station's recreational gardens, a beautiful biodome filled with plants from dozens of worlds, trying to identify which ones were safe for humans to be near and which ones would cause immediate respiratory failure. You know, normal stuff. I was crouched down examining something that looked like a fern but smelled like cinnamon when I felt it. Tiny claws on my back. Not big claws. Not adult Vakrian warrior claws. Tiny, needle-sharp, barely their claws that were somehow climbing up my spine like my body was a particularly interesting tree. I froze. Not out of intelligence or strategy, mind you, but because my brain had essentially blue screen trying to process what was happening. Every species sensitivity training session I'd taken flashed through my mind in rapid succession, each one more unhelpful than the last. Stay calm around predator species. Don't make sudden movements. Don't show fear. Don't challenge them. Don't run because that triggers prey drive. And Merp. The sound came from directly behind my head, and it was the most adorable thing I'd ever heard in my entire life, which made it exponentially more terrifying because adorable plus predator equals someone is about to die, and it's probably me. I very slowly turned my head to the left and found myself eye to eye with a Vacrian cub. And when I say cub, I mean a fluffy, big-eyed, absolutely precious little ball of murder potential that couldn't have been more than a few months old. It was perched on my shoulder, its tail wrapped around my neck for balance, staring at me with those huge amber eyes like I was the most fascinating thing it had ever encountered. Merp, it said again, tilting its head in a way that was devastatingly cute, and also showed off its already impressively sharp baby fangs. My brain, which had just finished rebooting from the initial shock, immediately crashed again. This was Krishna's cub. It had to be. There were only 3 Vacrian on the station, and cubs didn't exactly travel alone, which meant somewhere nearby was a mother who could and would absolutely disembowel me if she thought I was threatening her offspring. And here I was with said offspring literally clinging to my back like I was some kind of mobile jungle gym. "Oh no," I whispered. "Oh no, 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 no." Merp. The cub seemed to take this as encouragement and climbed higher, its tiny claws pricking through my jacket as it settled itself on top of my head like a very dangerous, very illegal hat. I'd like to say I handled this situation with grace and dignity. I'd like to say I calmly assessed my options and made a rational decision. What I actually did was stand up very slowly while trying not to dislodge the baby apex predator who had decided I was now its personal property, and started looking around frantically for anyone who might know what the hell I was supposed to do. The garden was empty. Of course it was. Because the universe has a sense of humor, and that sense of humor is dark and heavily invested in my suffering. "Okay," I said, mostly to myself, but also kind of to the cub who was now attempting to eat my hair. "Okay, we're going to be calm. We're going to be fine. We're just going to find your mother, and nobody has to get disemboweled today." The cub made a happy chirping sound and started purring, which sent vibrations through my skull in a way that would have been soothing if it wasn't coming from something that would eventually grow up to be a 7-foot killing machine. I started walking toward the garden exit, moving as smoothly as possible because I'd once read that sudden movements could startle predator young, and we really didn't need any startling happening right now. The cub seemed perfectly content with its new vantage point, occasionally swatting at passing butterflies with its paws and making little hunting chirps that were objectively adorable, and also a grim reminder that this thing was born to kill. I'd made it maybe 20 feet when I heard the roar. Now, I'd heard Vacrian vocalizations before. They had a whole range of sounds from the purring I mentioned to warning growls to what I can only describe as battle screams that sounded like someone was murdering a motorcycle. But this was different. This was the sound a mother makes when she can't find her child, amplified by predator instincts that had been honed over millions of years of evolution on a world where weakness meant death. It was absolutely bone-chilling, and I nearly dropped dead from fear on the spot. "That's your mom," I said to the cub with perhaps more volume than was strictly necessary. "We need to find your mom right now." The cub, completely unbothered by my panic, chirped happily and patted my head with one paw like it was comforting me. Which it kind of was, actually. except for the part where each pat reminded me that those paws had claws. I broke into what I hoped was a calm jog, heading toward the source of the roar. Other station inhabitants were clearing the corridors, which was smart because nobody wanted to be between a Vakrian mother and her missing cub. I saw a Glorbian diplomat literally teleport away rather than risk being in the vicinity. A group of Centaurian traders took one look at me, looked at what was on my head, and collectively decided that whatever business they had could wait until later. Much later. Possibly never. I rounded a corner and nearly collided with Krishna herself. If I thought she was intimidating before, it was nothing compared to seeing her in full maternal panic mode. Her scales were raised, making her appear even larger than usual. Her claws were fully extended, and her eyes were wild with a combination of fear and fury that made my primitive human hindbrain scream at me to drop everything and run for my life. We locked eyes. Me, a 5'6" human who was profoundly aware of her own mortality. Her, a 7-foot apex predator who looked like she was about 3 seconds away from painting the walls with my internal organs. "M'rp," said the cub from on top of my head, completely destroying the tension of the moment with its cheerful greeting. Krishna's eyes snapped to her offspring, and the change was instantaneous. The raised scales flattened. The claws retracted slightly. The murder glow in her eyes shifted to something that might have been relief if you squinted and used your imagination. "Jara," she growled. And even though I didn't speak Vakrian, I recognized the tone. Every mother in the universe, regardless of species, has that exact same, "You are in so much trouble, young lady" voice. The cub, now identified as Jara, made a protesting mewl and burrowed further into my hair, apparently deciding that the strange alien she'd just met was better than facing her mother's wrath. I stayed very, very still, because while Krishna didn't look like she was going to kill me anymore, I wasn't about to risk making any sudden movements and changing her mind. "I didn't take her," I said quickly, keeping my voice level. "She climbed on me, in the garden. I was looking for you to return her." Krishna stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see her processing this information. Then she did something I absolutely did not expect. She laughed. It wasn't like human laughter. It was deeper, more of a rumbling chuff that came from somewhere in her chest. But it was unmistakably amusement. "You let her climb on you," she said, her voice carrying that distinctive Vakrian purr underneath the words. "A Terran, letting a predator cub climb on their back." "I mean, I didn't really have much choice in the matter," I said, because apparently near-death experiences make me sarcastic. "She's surprisingly fast for something so small." "They have to be. Slow cubs do not survive on Vakros." Krishna moved closer, which took all of my willpower not to flinch away from, and reached up. "Jara, come." The cub made a defiant sound and clung tighter to my head. Krishna's eyes narrowed. She said something in rapid Vakrian that I didn't understand, but clearly carried the universal message of, "Don't make me count to 3. Jara responded with what I can only assume was the Vakrian equivalent of, "But moom," and absolutely refused to budge. "She likes you," Krishna said, and I couldn't tell if she was amused or concerned by this development. "Is that good or bad?" I asked, because I genuinely couldn't tell. "Yes. Helpful. Super helpful. Thanks for that clarification." Krishna made another sound, this one more gentle, more coaxing. Jara finally, reluctantly, climbed down from my head and into her mother's arms. Though she kept looking back at me and making sad little mewling noises, like I was abandoning her instead of the other way around. She has never approached an alien before, Krishna said, studying me with those unsettling amber eyes. Vakrian cubs are cautious of unknown species. It is instinct. Maybe she hasn't developed that instinct yet, I offered, because I had no idea where else this conversation was supposed to go. No, she has it. She hissed at the Glorbian ambassador just this morning. Krishna's head tilted, and I was reminded that I was being examined by a predator, evaluated and categorized in ways I probably didn't want to think too hard about. You did not fear her. Oh, I was absolutely terrified, I corrected immediately, because let's be honest here. I was just more worried about what you would do to me if I did something wrong. So I defaulted to staying very still and hoping for the best. That chuffing laugh again. Smart. Prey behavior, but smart. I decided not to take offense at being called prey, mostly because technically she wasn't wrong, and also because offending her seemed like a bad life choice. Jara squirmed in her mother's arms, reaching toward me with one paw and making increasingly insistent chirps. Krishna sighed, which apparently sounds like a more aggressive version of wind through a tunnel when you're a Vakrian. She wants you to hold her. She wants me to what now? Hold her? It is not a complicated concept, Terran. Maya, I said automatically. My name is Maya, and I really don't think that's a good idea. I don't know how to hold a Vakrian cub. What if I drop her? What if I hold her wrong? What if she decides my face looks tasty? You will not drop her. If you hold her wrong, she will adjust herself. And if she thinks your face looks tasty, I will correct her before she can act on the impulse. Krishna extended her arms, offering me her child like this was a completely normal and not at all terrifying scenario. I looked at Jara, who looked back at me with those huge eyes, and felt something in my chest do a weird flip-flop thing that I recognized as my maternal instincts, overriding my survival instincts. Humans, man, we're so stupid. I reached out and very carefully took the cub, supporting her weight the way you'd hold a human baby, because I didn't know what else to do. She immediately climbed up my chest and perched on my shoulder again, purring loud enough that I could feel it in my teeth. She has claimed you, Krishna said, sounding somewhere between amused and resigned. This is unfortunate. Unfortunate how? I asked, trying not to panic about the fact that there was a baby predator purring in my ear. Because now she will expect to see you regularly, and I will have to explain to the council why my daughter has bonded with a Terran. Krishna's tail lashed behind her, a sign of irritation I'd learned in my species sensitivity training. They already think I am too soft with her. You? Soft? I looked at the 7-foot killing machine and tried to imagine anyone, anywhere, ever describing her as soft. I let her sleep in my quarters instead of making her earn her place in the family den. I feed her before I eat. I comfort her when she has nightmares. Krishna's voice carried a defensive edge. By traditional standards, I am coddling her, making her weak. Oh, that was actually kind of sad. For what it's worth, I said carefully, human parenting experts would say you're doing exactly what you should be doing. Attachment, security, comfort. Those things don't make children weak. They make them confident, strong enough to explore and take risks because they know they have a safe place to come back to. Krishna stared at me for a long moment. You are a parent? No, but my sister is, and she made me read approximately 17,000 books about child development before she'd let me babysit my nephew. I shifted Jara's weight as she started climbing onto my head again. And from what I can tell, good parenting is pretty universal. Keep them safe, teach them what they need to know, and love them even when they're being absolute menaces. The Vakrian made a thoughtful humming sound. The Council of Mothers would have you exiled for such soft thinking. Good thing I'm not Vakrian then. Jara had successfully summited my head and was now surveying her domain like a tiny, fluffy queen. Though I have to ask, why did she decide I was climbable in the first place? You were crouched, small, non-threatening posture. Krishna started walking, apparently expecting me to follow, which I did because when a Vakrian tells you to follow, you follow. Cubs are curious about things that do not trigger their danger instincts. You must have seemed safe. I'm a human from a death world. Yes, but you are a small human who was looking at plants. Not exactly radiating danger. There was something almost teasing in her tone now, which was weird because I didn't think Vakrian did teasing. Besides, cubs can sense intent. You meant her no harm. We walked through the station corridors, and I became acutely aware that we were attracting stares. A human with a Vakrian cub on her head, walking next to an adult Vakrian who wasn't actively trying to remove said human's limbs. It was probably the most interesting thing to happen on Station Kepler 442 in months. The other delegates are going to have questions, I said. Let them question. My daughter has chosen a companion. I will not deny her that. Krishna glanced at me sideways. Unless you wish to refuse? Did I wish to refuse? The sensible part of my brain, the part that had kept me alive through 26 years on Earth and 3 weeks on an alien space station, was screaming, yes. Refuse? Politely decline. Make up an excuse. Do not get involved with apex predator politics. But the rest of my brain, the part that was currently experiencing a Vakrian cub purring contentedly on my head and occasionally patting my hair with soft paws, that part was singing a very different tune. I mean, I should probably learn how to properly interact with Vakrian young if she's going to keep climbing on me, I said, trying to sound practical instead of delighted. For safety reasons. And diplomatic relations. Very official diplomatic relations. Krishna made that chuffing laugh again. Yes, very official. She paused outside a doorway that I recognized as leading to the Vakrian quarters. Come. If you are to be Jara's companion, you must learn our ways, and you must meet the others. The others? My voice definitely did not squeak. My mate, Veron, and our other 2 cubs, Kresh and Mala. She palmed the door open. Do not worry, Terran Maya. They will probably not eat you. Probably. I make no guarantees. And with that incredibly reassuring statement, she walked through the door, leaving me with a choice. I could turn around, return to my nice, safe, human quarters, and pretend this whole incident never happened. Or I could walk through that door into the home of apex predators and potentially become the galaxy's first human-Vakrian relations specialist. Jara chirped and patted my head encouragingly. You're a terrible influence, I told her, and walked through the door. The Vakrian quarters were not what I expected. I'd been imagining something stark and militaristic, all hard edges and weapon racks and probably some kind of ritual combat circle. What I got was, well, cozy. There were soft fabrics hanging on the walls, cushions scattered across the floor, and what looked suspiciously like toys strewn about in the chaotic way that all homes with young children inevitably end up looking. And there, in the center of the room, was the biggest Vakrian I'd seen yet. Veron made Krishna look petite. He was easily 8 feet tall, built like a tank had a baby with a freight train, and his scales were a deep midnight blue that seemed to shift colors in the light. He was currently wrestling with two other cubs, both slightly larger than Zhara, in what I desperately hoped was play fighting and not actual combat. All three of them stopped and turned to look at me when I entered. "Varan," Krishna said calmly, like she hadn't just brought a human into their private quarters. "This is Maya. Zhara has claimed her." Varan's eyes, a lighter amber than Krishna's, focused on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. Then he looked at his daughter, still perched on my head, purring away without a care in the world. "Huh," he said, which apparently sounds like a low rumble in Vakrian. "Didn't see that coming." The other two cubs, Kresh and Mala, crept closer, their movements predatory in a way that Zhara's hadn't been. They circled me, sniffing, evaluating, deciding if I was friend or food or something else entirely. "Kresh, Mala, gentle," Krishna warned. "She is new to our ways." Kresh, who appeared to be the older of the two, sat back on his haunches and tilted his head. "She smells weird." "Thank you," I said, because what else do you say to that? "Like plants and fear." Mala, smaller but somehow more unsettling, reached out and very carefully touched my leg with one paw, claws retracted. "Are all Terrans this small?" "No, some of us are even smaller," I said, which in retrospect probably wasn't the most reassuring thing I could have led with. "How do you survive?" Kresh asked, sounding genuinely confused. "You have no claws, no scales, your teeth are tiny. We use tools and guns, lots of guns." Both cubs' ears perked up at that. "You hunt with weapons?" Mala's tail was swishing with interest now. "Can you show us?" "Absolutely not," Krishna and I said in unison, which startled both of us. Varan made that chuffing sound of amusement. "I like her. She can stay." "Oh, good, because I was really worried about that," I muttered, which made Zhara chirp happily and nuzzle against my hair. What followed was possibly the strangest afternoon of my life, and considering I'd left Earth on an experimental faster-than-light ship and had spent the last 3 weeks learning to eat foods that required 17 different digestive enzyme supplements, that was saying something. Krishna taught me how to properly hold a Vakrian cub, which involved a lot more supporting of the hindquarters than I'd expected, and a warning to never, ever restrict their front legs, because that's where their climbing claws are, and restricting those triggers a panic response. I learned that Vakrian cubs play hunt from basically the moment they can walk, and that what looks like vicious fighting is actually how they learn coordination and social boundaries. I learned that they're ticklish under their chins, which made Zhara make the most ridiculous, giggling chirp sound I'd ever heard. I learned that they love stories, and that Vakrian bedtime tales are significantly more violent than human ones, but serve the same purpose of teaching moral lessons and cultural values. And I learned that despite being apex predators from a nightmare planet where everything is constantly trying to kill you, Vakrian parents are they're just parents. Tired, worried, doing their best to raise their kids right, hoping they're not screwing it all up too badly. This is not what I expected when I signed up for the exchange program, I admitted as Zhara dozed on my lap, worn out from an intense play hunt session with her siblings. "What did you expect?" Krishna asked. She was lounging on a cushion nearby, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Formal meetings, cultural presentations, maybe some tense diplomatic negotiations over trade agreements." I gently stroked Zhara's head, marveling at how soft her fur was. "Not babysitting?" "Is that what you think you are, doing? Babysitting?" I considered that. "No, I guess not. This feels more like, I don't know, family?" Krishna's expression softened in a way I didn't know Vakrian faces could. "Yes, family, you understand. My sister would tell you I'm terrible with kids." Your sister is wrong. You are patient, gentle. You listen. She paused. And you do not fear what we are. You respect it, but you do not fear. Oh, I'm definitely still afraid, I corrected. But I'm working on it. Good. Fear keeps you cautious. No fear makes you stupid. She stretched, her movements fluid and dangerous, even in relaxation. The cubs like you. Varan approves. I trust you. This is significant. Significant how? Vakrian do not bond outside our species easily. We are, the council would say, too prideful, too isolated. Krishna's tail flicked thoughtfully. But perhaps that is our weakness. Perhaps learning to trust others, to find family beyond our own kind, perhaps that is what makes us stronger. I looked down at the sleeping cub in my lap, felt the warm weight of her, heard the gentle purr of her breathing, thought about how terrified I'd been just hours ago, and how that terror had transformed into something else entirely. I think, I said slowly, that the galaxy is going to be really confused when they find out that humans and Vakrian are compatible. Krishna laughed, that deep, chuffing sound that I was starting to find comforting. Let them be confused. We will be too busy raising cubs to care. And that's how I, Maya Chen, Terran representative to the Galactic Council, accidentally became the first human to be adopted into a Vakrian family unit. The paperwork alone took 3 weeks to process, and there were at least 4 emergency council sessions dedicated to debating whether this was a diplomatic disaster or a historic breakthrough in interspecies relations. I didn't attend any of them because I was too busy learning Vakrian lullabies and how to properly referee cub play fights without getting accidentally scratched. Turns out the secret to galactic peace isn't formal treaties or trade agreements. It's a tiny predator cub deciding you're climbable, and a mother deciding you're trustworthy enough to be near her children. Who knew? The council eventually ruled that my adoption into Krishna's family was acceptable under diplomatic cultural exchange provisions, though they added about 17,000 pages of documentation requirements and stipulations. Something about setting precedent, maintaining proper boundaries, ensuring no biological contamination, the usual bureaucratic nonsense that makes my head hurt just thinking about it. But here's what they didn't anticipate. Once one human got adopted by Vakrian, others started paying attention. And once other species saw that the terrifying death dealers from Vakros were actually just really devoted parents who wanted the best for their kids, well, perspective started shifting. Turns out most of the galaxy had been so busy being afraid of what the Vakrian could do that they never stopped to ask what the Vakrian wanted to do. And mostly what they wanted was the same thing everyone wants. Safety for their families, opportunities for their children, a chance to live without constantly proving their worth through combat. 3 months after Jara climbed onto my back in that garden, the Vakrian Council of Mothers officially opened diplomatic relations with Earth. Not because of any formal treaty or economic agreement, but because they'd heard humans had something called puppy therapy and psychological support animals, and maybe, just maybe, that kind of softness wasn't weakness after all. 6 months after that, I was appointed as the official Earth Vakros cultural liaison, which is a fancy title that means I spend half my time explaining to humans that, no, Vakrian will not eat your children, and the other half explaining to Vakrian that no, humans are not secretly planning to poison them with our weird food. And every single day, without fail, Jara finds me somewhere on the station and climbs onto whatever part of my body is most inconvenient at that exact moment. She's bigger now, more coordinated, her baby fluff giving way to sleek scales. Her claws are sharper, her hunting instincts more refined. But she still purrs when I scratch under her chin. still brings me her toys when she wants to play, still falls asleep on my lap like I'm the safest place in the entire galaxy. And maybe I am. For her. Just like she's become my safe place too, in her own bizarre predator-cub kind of way. The galaxy is still figuring out what to make of humans. We're too reckless, too emotional, too prone to adopting anything that holds still long enough. We look at something that could kill us, and our first instinct is apparently to pet it and give it a name. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the scariest things in the universe just need someone brave enough, or maybe stupid enough, to not run away when they get close. Sometimes monsters are just people who've never had anyone tell them they don't have to be monstrous to be strong. And sometimes, all it takes to change the entire trajectory of galactic diplomacy is one tiny cub with murder mittens deciding that, yeah, that weird, squishy alien looks climbable. I felt tiny claws on my back, and I realized it was a predator's cub. Best mistake I ever made was not running away. The end.